If you know where to look and read the fine print, this can equal a lot of value. Singles. Singles, singles, and more singles. Welcome back, everyone. MTG Moxman here. Thanks again for hanging out with me on the channel today as we're going to talk about singles. And it's funny, not reserve list, but a lot of value. Most people will think of a valuable card being a Sheoldred. You're going to talk about the new Elesh Norn, right? You're talking about new cards in Magic the Gathering because that's probably what you play. You're probably a Commander player. You're having a good time and you're thinking, look how awesome this card is. Look how much value there is in this particular card. The thing I like to think about when I look at those amazing cards is the fact they're not worth that much and they're not that special. And really, in most cases, they're here one day and gone the next. And they'll get reprinted and they'll come around again and they'll get reprinted. And that first Elesh Norn will be $100 and then 80 and then 60 and then 20. And of course, there'll be a new type of Elesh Norn. There'll be a new Garruk. There'll be a new Jace. There'll be something new and flashy to get our attention. And that will be the next running wheel. I know it sounds horrible, right? But it's just the nature of the game we're in. But here's the funny thing about this game. If you read the fine print on that, the really tiny writing in the bottom left-hand corner of where I buy my nachos and cheese, there is something written there that most people never understand in this game. And I hate to say it, but it's most of you out there. Most of you. The value is not always in how many times it's been reprinted. Some cards that get reprinted will still have value. They'll go down in price, but the original printings can have value. There are examples of this going back to the very beginning of Magic the Gathering. The understanding that people don't get when they say, oh, I have this, I have this, and it got reprinted, now it's worthless. But don't trade away your originals. Never trade away the first printing. Because as Magic continues to evolve, as it keeps chasing its own tail and going out there into the stratosphere, and as the ebbs and flows of this game happen in the secondary market, the primary market, the bannings, the unbannings, wherever it is in the game, I've noticed a trend over the years that shows how things are working out after 30 years. I want to show you something here. Take a look at this first card, okay? Take a look at this. On the screen, I have Desert, 1993 Arabian Nights. But also I have Desert. I think that's the Commander one from Baldur's Gate, okay? This doesn't have that many printings, but it's out there. Now, the original 1993 printing is $20 Canadian. And that was for a moderately played. I couldn't find near mint. But the Desert from 2021's printing of Baldur's Gate or whatever. Oh, no, it was Adventures in Dungeons & Dragons, whatever. The D&D set. This thing is $2.50. That's quite the disparity in the card. Now you're probably asking, who cares? That card's not that great. I understand. It may not be your flavor. It may not be your cup of tea. I get that. But what I'm pointing to, what I'm trying to show you all, is that original card has a lot more value than any reprinting that followed after it. Now, no matter what cards I show you today, they all work out the same. They all will have more value in the original printing. And the more playable that card is, the higher value they could potentially be there years later. Because as people look to bling out their decks, again, look at that card. Which one looks better to you? Look at the coloration, the old saturation of the colors in that deck. You know what I mean? To me, it's the old card looks so superior to anything new. That's because I'm an old person. But as you guys age, you're going to go after that bling. You're going to go after cards you remember, and that means first printings. Don't trade away your first printed cards. Store it. I don't care if it goes down in value. I think you could be doing yourself a disservice. I think you could be losing out. Look at Oasis. Now, Oasis, by the way, has not been really printed again for since 1995. That's why I'm showing the most recent printings. 1995 was actually the last time Oasis came out in a set, but it says prevent 1 damage to any creature. Look at Oasis from Arabian Nights, 1993 versus 1995, which I think was a 4th or 5th edition. $47 for the original, $1.50 for the reprint. And even though that reprint is still 20-something years old, even though it's 20-something years old, the original, which is only 2 years difference, holds so much more value. Any older set will have a lower print run. And as this game evolves and as the player base grows exponentially over years and years and decades, the kind of theory will be that as new sets come along and cards do get reprinted, people will say, well, everyone's got this version of it. Everyone's got that version. They will start looking for a way to be unique, a way to stand out. Typical of society, right? You want to keep up with the Joneses, you got to find what I can find, and that's looking for those older cards. And I'm talking, guys, look at this one. I'm talking here, like, look at Aladdin, 1993, $95. And again, we look at the Chronicles edition in 1995, and it's $1.50. Now, gain control of target artifact. Lose control of target artifact if Aladdin leaves play. Imagine being able to take an artifact every turn from somebody. I know it costs 4. I know it's a 1/1. Not, I get it. Definitely not the flavor of the day. But it's still an old card. It can still be played in certain commander decks if you can get it out mid to late game, mess people up, have some fun with it. Even if you hate the card. Look at the value difference based on the age. Now apply that to any of the cards you really like that have current value but go to a first printing. We're still in the early stages. It's only like the last 15 years they've really ramped this stuff up. 15 years is not nearly enough time to see how much value will become some of these cards. As Wizards grows their sets and as they keep adding new cards and new flavor and new styles, some cards will actually get marked out by a superior card, right? A strictly better version of a card being made. But other cards will just get reprintings. Or Wizards will find that that card's broken and won't reprint it at all. That's what they did away with things like Circle of Protection, Banding, certain cards that will never get a reprint. Not to mention, any of the old cards I'm showing you on today's list, any of the cards here. Let me go to this last one here. Let me show this last one here. If you go look at this one, look at an Alpha Sol Ring versus the 2022 Brothers War Sol Ring. $2,500 for an Alpha Sol Ring, and that's because the numbers are so much lower, right? The print run is so much tinier, and the new sets have such a large print run, which is why that card's $3.50. Like, it's not a lot of money. Now, take a look here. The Alpha Sol Ring only had 4,500 copies. Talk about bling. Knowing that when this was created, there was only 4,500 copies in the whole world. How many survived? Let's take away at least 50%. People used to throw those things away at a tournament because they were trying the game out and they pitched it in the garbage. Aladdin, 20,000 copies. Oasis, 41,000. Desert, 341,000. Those numbers seem crazy, right? You seem like, oh, it's a lot. It's not a lot. When there's millions and millions of Magic players, there's not even enough for everyone to have one. There's not even enough for 341,000 players to have one. Because again, destruction comes into play. So as your cards age, as you start looking at your collection and you're thinking which cards to trade and which cards to get rid of, I would suggest to you that it is not going to hurt you to hold on to an original printing of a card you enjoy, to hold on to a Shieldred and not get rid of it, to even hang on to banned cards that are not unbanned yet. Because original printings, for anyone who decides to set collect, anyone looking for a near mint version of a card, think about how those cards extrapolate out. Look at any card from any reserve list set that's not reserve list. So go to the old sets and look at how some of these cards are aging. Higher print run sets like Fallen Empires are still really low in value, right? Because the desirability and playability of those cards are not as great as, say, something from Alliances like Lake of the Dead. They don't hold the same value. I hate to say it. I love my Rainbow Veil, but Lake of the Dead is kind of a superior card. I still love Rainbow Veil, though. So when you look at those things, you start keying that stuff in. Any original printing you can keep near mint that you don't have to trade in, who knows what somebody's going to look at that card 15 years from now, 20 years from now. It can sit in your binder. You can still play with it. Still have a great time. You've already invested the time, money, or got lucky and cracked a pack. But why trade in a card that could have massive exponential growth year after year as more reprints come out and as people try to find a way to be unique, look back to the original printing of a card? Because nothing can get somebody's breath caught in their throat than saying, what card is that? And you're like, this card already exists, bro. This is just your first ever edition of it. Like an Alpha Sol Ring. Think about all those old cards that we, as older players, seek out. And now think of the cards you own now that could become the next old card. There's no guarantees. None. None. But there's no harm in trying. You're not at a loss to give yourself a break and see if a card like that could have value. And because the history of the game is behind us, you can look at other cards, other examples, look at those other sizes and say, hey, how many cards do I think are printed? Probably in the millions. But if it's a first printing of a card that was kind of hard to get in the mythic level, there's probably not going to be as many as people think. And people will trade them in. And people will get rid of them. And then if it gets held long enough or if that card becomes valuable enough, why trade in, let's just use an example, a Flooded Strand. Why go trade in a Flooded Strand when you can get an original one and just hold on to it forever and not worry about it? And then if it happens to be worth more money, kudos. And how about Polluted Delta, an original printing? Think of those shock lands from Ravnica. Think ahead to every time you've seen the first printing of a check land, a fast land. Remember, most players always remember mana base, they remember huge bomb creatures, and they remember iconic artifacts are usually the most typical things people remember. It's funny how enchantments and sorceries don't really fit the bill for what most players hone in on when they look for cards later. I hope this was a little bit informative. I hope you enjoyed the video, because I've seen this more and more when you start looking at cards and looking at the age, as everyone dives into this singles market to chase down certain cards. It's funny how many players are going for unlimited lands, beta lands, alpha lands, spending the 20, 30, or 40 bucks to get those lands, because that is a bigger bling factor than anything Wizards of the Coast puts out now. You can't match the age, the nostalgia, and the prestige of having old cards like that in a collection. I don't think people have noticed how far collector edition cards have fallen, but take a look at a few of the Power 9, Power 10 cards, you know, things like Force Field, Time Vault. You'd be surprised how far some of these prices have fallen. Cyclopean Tomb, crazy how cheap some of these cards can be bought. And they can never be replicated again. Those are reserve list cards that can't be replicated. But if you want a cheap card, look at something like Smoke. It will mess people up. Most people don't even use it. What about Mana Short? An unlimited Mana Short for 10 bucks? Are you kidding me? Guys, original printings. It's not something you should ignore. Any set collector who goes looking for that card later is going to be looking for the best copy possible. And with prices the way they are right now in the market, it's never been a better time to buy. So thanks a lot for being here. Thanks for hanging out with me on the channel today. Something to consider is all I'm saying. Can't wait to see those comments in the comments section to see who made it to the end of this video. And again, a big shout out and thank you to all the fantastic patrons on this channel who make the wheels turn by allowing me to be able to create content and bring it to you guys each and every day. Thanks again to those fantastic patrons. I'll see you on the weekend. It's interesting. By the way, welcome back to the end. It's interesting to think the value you can find in singles cards when you're not looking at new stuff, when you're not looking dead center at a new set that's coming out. Put your eyes to the left and look at Arabian Nights. Look at the Dark. Look at Legends. Cards that were never affordable, and I'm not talking always reserve lists, just the fact that prices have fallen so far has made these weird kind of fringe cards that will never get reprinted be available for $5, $6, $7. Would I rather get this? Would I rather get that? I'd rather collect them all. I feel like I'm playing Pokemon right now. There's so many options available. And most players are never going to see it. Most players never make it to the end of these videos. I already know roughly how many people make it. Right? And they're not going to really pay attention. They're going to skip over this video. But you guys are the special ones. You know. So now you know what I know. Yeah. There's a lot of value out there. A lot of value. A lot of value.